And welcome to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, the COVID edition, the stay-at-home edition, hopefully the soon-to-be patio edition. Mike, we're thrilled, I know, to have a wonderful guest with us, somebody I've grown to know over the last few years. We have Ray Duhamel, who is a planner by profession, a registered professional planner, partner at Jones Consulting Group. Thanks for joining us, Ray.
Thank you very much, Arif.
Hello, Ray, and hello, Arif.
Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good. I've moved recently. I decided to
move back in time.
Yeah, a little bit retro. I moved for this show, and I thought it was only appropriate to have Ray on the show this week with us to talk about, the future, to talk about the way things are going to go, and ask Ray to sort of polish off on the crystal ball a little bit and tell us. Ray, let's get right into it. I mean, 3 months ago, it could have been considered business as usual. We talk about one of the favorite topics at council and in the planning world is places to grow and how we're going to build complete communities. And then all of a sudden, COVID hit. And what happened, Ray? What are you hearing from your clients? What are you hearing from neighborhood meetings or virtual neighborhood meetings on the way life is going to be tomorrow? How would you sum it up?
Well, I think I would sum it up that I'm pretty impressed overall about how people, the public and older clients and a whole wide variety of generations have been able to learn new technology and allow us to still have dialogue. I think we're still learning, we're figuring things out, but it's pretty exciting to see overall on a positive level how we've learned to adapt. We're very adaptable overall. And sometimes we get entrenched and think that change is scary, but I think this change has forced us to take a better look again and say, you know what, we can still do business. And I think that's the best part. So what are we hearing from developers? They're optimistic. They still want to open sales centers. They still have people calling them to buy houses. They still have people wanting to develop industrial and other types of projects. So, I would say the outlook is positive. Everybody is cautiously optimistic. Let's just put it that way.
So the incentive's still there from both the public as well as the developers, people in the business. How are you seeing the municipalities that you're dealing with in terms of processing applications? Are we at that point where you can make an evaluation of that? Are they on board? Is there a shift there, or are there complications? Or?
I hope I'm not overflowing with optimism, but I want to share with you that I've been really pleased with how municipalities have been handling applications. I've been making new applications. Applications have been going before council, going before committees of adjustment. I've had everything from Zoom public meetings to phone call committee of adjustment meetings for severance applications. Business is still handling it. They're still granting, still considering applications. The public still has an opportunity to participate in those processes, and things are still moving forward in a
Excellent.
Very positive way, Mike.
So we just recently had here, and by the way, I should help out our audience. I don't know how many of our audience members watch council on a religious basis, on a weekly basis, but Ray, you're a very familiar face and voice at council. You're certainly held in high regard at city council, both by your counterpart colleagues, if you will, who are the planners at the city level, but also by the mayor and council. I recall every time that you came to council with a presentation, it was a real opportunity for me to learn something. You had a way with words and speaking in plain English at my level so that I understood what you were bringing from technical really to my level. So I've always appreciated. Ray, I know you're well trusted in the industry. That being said, yes, you're right. We just recently, actually, for Gowan Street, had a multi-unit application go before council. I think it's 4 or 5 stories, 7 units, etc. Wonderful. You're right. We have embraced it. We have adapted, and certainly also the residents had the opportunity to come out and speak in favor or otherwise about the project. That being said, what's the reality? We have been conditioned, if you will, to embrace a concept that was talking about intensification, getting used to the idea of urbanization, of gentrification, but also really in living in closer quarters, whether it's in multi-units or condominiums, et cetera, maybe more commuters. With COVID came a reality, and we've learned that my company, my staff, they've all been working from home for the last 3 months. And as much as many people thought the world would come to an end, and in fairness to some businesses have not managed to either pivot or survive or adapt, and nobody takes any pleasure in that whatsoever. But for those businesses who have managed to adapt and survive, many of our staff are working from home, and we figured out that it does work. How does that change the need of the consumer, both residentially and the need of the consumer commercially in terms of office space? Is that too much of a question, or is that okay?
No, I think those are great questions. And I think, Arif and Mike, I think we are not at a small bump in the road. I think we're actually at a paradigm shift in how people perceive the use of space. And I really think that's the key question, is the use of space. You talked about urbanization and intensification. I think that will continue. I just can't foresee a scenario where everybody flocks out of the cities and tries to grab a little piece of land out in some small community that doesn't have services, doesn't have transit, doesn't have community centers. I just don't think that's the reality of a COVID response. I do think on the residential side, though, the COVID response is taking a closer look at what is vitally important to consumers and to residents to have a good lifestyle. Because if you think about a lot of units being built, people put premiums on how big their bedroom is, yet they don't spend a whole lot of time in the bedroom living outside of the actual sleeping part of it, right? So, maybe walk-in closets and bedrooms and master bathrooms don't need to be as big if instead you can take that space and convert it and create, have a better home office, or, instead of buying a 1-bedroom, you buy a 1-bedroom with den, so you can work from home. I think residentially, the use of space is vitally important. And I think that's what's going to likely change going forward, is the consumer will demand more change to how space has been planned. And I suspect one of the aftermaths of this may be that they just won't accept designs that have been done in the past. They will want more innovative and creative uses of space. So instead of having balconies on condo buildings that are really not used at all, people perceive that balconies are so vitally important to get fresh air and whatnot. The reality is, drive by, I challenge you, and I've been doing this for decades, driving by condos and count how many people you see standing out on their balcony. You don't. People just don't use their balcony. So maybe instead of, that space becomes inside space, and there's more amenity space in the unit. There's larger amenity spaces in the building itself, other than just like some sort of a party room. Maybe.
So great. I think that's a great spot for us just to take a quick break. When we come back on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and listen, I love this. I'm learning so much always. Let's pick up on that and talk about use of space going forward. Mike, I know you've got a question burning in the back of your mind. Stick with us on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV. Barrie, our guest today is Ray Duhamel, who's the partner and a planner at Jones Consulting Group. Ray, thank you for being here. We're right into a very hot conversation of what does life look like in terms of planning community, planning homes and neighborhoods post-COVID. We're right now into use of space. And Ray, you were talking about the fact that we might be able to have the same footprint, but more efficient or better use of it. And I had to cut you off. Why don't you pick up there? And then I know Mike's got a question right on the tail of that.
Sure. I think just in closing out that thought process, Arif, is I believe that the space that people buy likely won't be a whole lot different than what they were buying before, but how that space is laid out and what their expectations for that space may very well change. So instead of putting a premium on a larger bedroom or a larger bathroom or whatever space, or that outdoor balcony, maybe instead they want to put a premium on having a multi-purpose room that can be a guest room, or it can be an amenity area. It can be a space where they can work from home. those are the types of things where they may prioritize, hey, I'll take a little less living room space, a little less bedroom space, because I want the flexibility in the future not to have to work at my kitchen table.
Yeah.
Very good. Mike?
My observation I've been doing this 20 years, real estate locally here in Barrie, and the multi-unit product was just starting to come into popularity when I got into the business, early 2000s. But what I've seen change is the quality of the product itself. I mean, early multi-units were builder grade, basic, affordable units. Now that the demand has increased and more people, millennials, others looking for affordability reasons, pressures from the government, there's all kinds of influences that are why we have, the growing numbers of multi-unit projects in the city here. But the quality is getting better, I see. And you, in what you do, you need a crystal ball, because what you do today is basically comes to fruition 2-3 years down the road, maybe even longer. When you're projecting ahead, looking both at what, the telltale signs were prior to COVID-19 and with COVID-19, do you see any changes, like increases in quality or changes in expectations and living styles that translate into the product itself?
Mike, good question. I think overall, we've made overall as a profession, and that's just professions from planning, architecture, builders, the whole gambit have worked very hard to raise the bar. And I think you will see that I agree with you. When I started doing planning in Barrie in the 90s, you're right. There wasn't a lot of medium density or multi-unit type of dwellings that were built, and the ones that were built at a lower cost. And overall affordability wasn't a key factor in those days. I can still remember walking through open houses where you could buy a 2,000 square foot, 2-car garage, 2-story home for $170,000. And I'd say that's 98, 99 still. Mm-hmm. So in a time period where the price was not a factor, people were gravitating towards larger dwellings, and they didn't put the same focus on urban design and architectural details. As units become smaller, people become more focused on the quality of the building and the space that they're occupying. Yeah. And that's why you'll see today that there's many new products out there, the new designs, that the buildings are vastly better and improved over what they were. And I think they're buildings on our landscape that we can be proud of.
So, but Ray, let me ask you,
if I might, just as a tail onto that, working from home is becoming more and more the thing, and certainly with COVID-19, it's been a requirement for many. Is that something that's implemented in the design of your products going forward?
Well, I think that goes to the exact same thing. I don't think the outside of the building will look different necessarily, but maybe there will be more of a focus on ensuring that buildings like ones that I've been working on recently have rooftop patios, maybe more a key component, so that you can physically space people about in an amenity area. You might find that people are going to look at different interior layouts to maximize the space the way they want them, rather than the perception of space, like balconies or bedrooms that are not necessarily, they don't add to your quality of life, but they're perceived as being important as a buyer in that market. That may quantumly shift now towards reusing that space in a better way.
Right, Ray, but I want to ask you this, because we really haven't touched on what I think is the elephant in the room. People left Toronto to come to Barrie to buy their 50, 60 foot frontage lot with their 3,000 square foot home. And I'm not saying everybody lives there, but that's sort of the perception of, if I wanted to live in a condo, I'd live in downtown Toronto. Now, the reality is we've embraced it. We have condos in Barrie. We have multi-units in Barrie. Certainly, they've become a reality, and I think they've been well embraced. My question, though, regarding COVID is, did this cause people to pause? Did this cause your clients as developers to pause and say, wait a second, we're going to go, we may see ourselves reverting back to either towns or detached or anything like that? What are your thoughts on that? People wanting to say, I tried staying inside my condo for 3 months straight. It didn't work. I've got cabin fever. I need my postage stamp, if nothing else, piece of grass.
Arif, good question. I think my response to that is that we need choice. And that's the key element. I don't think it's exodus from buying condos to trying to buy singles, because one of the critical factors, COVID or not, is affordability. So not everybody can walk into to buy a 40 or 50-foot lot with a 2,500 square foot home. It's just not affordable to everybody. So you need choice. And I think where Barrie has made tremendous strides, and the building community has made tremendous strides over the last couple of decades, is providing choice. When I started in this business, we were churning out 40 and 50-foot lots as the norm. And the builders and the developers of the day thought, well, this is what people want. There was no choice. To Mike's point, there were very, very few multiple family dwellings that were constructed in the 90s. I think from 1997 to 2006, somewhere in there, the city of Barrie was the fastest growing city in the country. And it was grown on single detached dwellings. So there's tons of supply in Barrie for singles, and there's still a need for singles, but there's also a need for different housing types. And so
the demand for all types is still there.
Yeah, if we were only building condos and there were no choice, I would think we have a fundamental problem. But the evolution of Barrie as a city is to provide a wide variety of housing choices. And that's where I think the province and successive provincial governments have gotten it right. Make sure there's choice, because when there's no choice, the builders dictate the terms and the people buy what's available. And sometimes that doesn't lead to a healthy city.
Good. I think that's a great spot for us to pause one more time. We're going to go to break. Ray Duhamel from Jones Consulting Group, thank you for being with us. When we come back on the other side, I know Mike's got a question about commercial development and the future of office space as we know it. Stay with us on Rogers TV Barrie for the next portion of Hitting Home with Mike and Arif when we come right back. And welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, the COVID edition. We're joined by a fantastic guest, Ray Duhamel, planner at Jones Consulting Group. Thanks for being here. Before we went to the break, we've been talking about use of space and changing our residence, our home, our neighborhoods, the way we know them. But since we figured out that everybody knows how to work from home now, Mike, you had a question about commercial space.
For sure. And a lot of what or where we're at in your business, my business, Arif's business is kind of a watch and see point. See how the people respond, see where the confidence level is. One of the things prior to COVID-19 we were seeing, certainly in Barrie, is the gentrification of our downtown. And with that, we were seeing a lot of combined residential and commercial spaces being created. I expect that will continue, but I also am curious on your thoughts as to whether the pace that was happening within the downtown and everywhere else is going to continue. Obviously, there's more people going to be working from home. A lot of businesses that have been impacted may have to step back. And so I have a feeling the demand for commercial rental space may subside for the short term. You have any thoughts on all of that?
Sure. Well, thanks, Mike. I think the knee-jerk reaction would be, well, we don't need commercial office space any longer. Let's just start. Let's get out of that business, and we can all businesses that have commercial office space can have or quarter their space and move on. I don't think that's a reality moving forward. And I think part of the reason is that as much as for every employee that I think going forward may continue to work from home, there's going to be more space likely needed in commercial office spaces to address post-COVID. So where before you had a small meeting room and people could, you could jam a lot of people into that meeting room, I think realistically now you need, for that same meeting, you're going to need more space. So, and maybe people will work in and out of the office. So they're in, one day, so people might share office spaces where they didn't before. But I think it's very similar to residential, but in a completely opposite way. The use of the commercial space in the office may change. I think I look at my own office space. We just expanded in November to take on an additional 1,500 square feet, made a much bigger boardroom. My initial reaction when COVID was putting us through the ringer was to say, oh, geez, well, we're not going to need a bigger boardroom. We're not going to need that space. I don't think that's the case any longer. I really think if we're going to have productive, collaborative meetings where people, like clients, still want to be able to come in and talk face to face, I think these Zoom meetings and and Google meetings and WebEx and Teams meetings are all fantastic, there's still going to be a need to have face-to-face sit-down time. And I think we're going to need more space to be able to make that happen.
So I think my own thoughts on that are the home office concept is not going to replace the physical office. It'll enhance it. It'll become a part. It'll be one of the tools we use. I think there was an issue with trust maybe with employers wondering, could people actually work from home and still do their jobs? And I think through this we've learned, yeah, people can be productive from home. But I know my wife, she just returned back to her physical office, which is next door to where you guys used to be on Dunlop Street. And she couldn't be happier to be back in that physical space, but at the same time has learned that, hey, I can do much of this work from home when needed. So there's going to be a blend for her of both at home and physical office. And I think that's going to be seen replicated all across the board.
Ray, sorry, go ahead, Ray. Finish your thought.
I was just thinking, I do think that one of the big questions will be going forward is how many developers will actually initiate new commercial office projects. I think we could see a cycle where there's a real dip in bringing new square footage online. And so, that may be a 5-year cycle before people really start investing in building new office space again once we know what's going on. I would be shocked, unlike the residential market, which that people still need to buy houses and people still want to buy new homes. I'm not sure that there's as many people lining up to acquire new office space commercially. So I do think I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lag in the market in that regard.
So Ray, we do have, what was it, about 30% of what was formerly known as the annexation land, the secondary plan, Hewitts and Salem. About 30%, I think, where that was earmarked for industrial growth or commercial growth. Am I correct in that?
Well, there in the Salem secondary plan areas, there were large tracts of industrial areas available, and then in both Salem and Hewitts, there's mixed use pockets where the city is looking for, driving towards ground floor commercial with residential above at higher densities. So creating, like along Yonge Street, for example, new Main Street sort of environments where you can walk down, go to patios, go to shops, things like that.
So we've got just under 2 minutes. We've got to wrap this up. But basically what I've been hearing you hint at is that there is a profession around use of space, commercial office space. There's almost like there was a formula for how many square foot does each employee get in any given type of scenario, whether it's an administrative or an office scenario. And what we're seeing is, while there still may be some people working in home, and yes, there's always technology that comes out to make sure that, they take screenshots of your screen to make sure that you actually are being productive. For those who do come in or do have to come in, we might see the same amount of people requiring additional space. So they may fill that gap of those who are working at home. What are your thoughts on modular spaces? Because I think we've seen more and more of that lately, flexible walls and partitions, et cetera. And also the types of places where you can, like the Regis type of, rent an office, small office rental. We got 1 minute. You got to nail all of that in 1 minute, Ray.
Yeah, I think some office spaces are going to really struggle with retrofitting because they've invested, like my own office, we've invested in drywall and setting the table on the inside. So complete renovations would have massive hits on productivity. I think it's those other spaces where you can rent an office space and have a shared receptionist and those sort of things. I think they are much more flexible environments. They really kin to the small business who's just trying to get out of their basement and actually try to have a physical space. So I think some may be able to adjust. Others, like my own office, I'm realizing that it would be a long shot for us to start ripping walls down all over the place and try to redo everything. I think that's not likely.
So the perfect wrap up I'm hearing is that out of every challenge comes a new opportunity, and you're going to be here for the next decade to see us through it. Ray Duhamel, planner at Jones Consulting Group and a legacy voice at City Council. Thank you very much for joining us on the show, and we'll definitely have you back in the not too distant future.
Thank you. My pleasure.